Hello and welcome to today's lesson on how to beat titled players at the game of chess. For full clarity before we begin, I would like to mention that I actually have not officially defeated a titled player at a game of chess. But twice I became extremely close to doing so, and for a variety of different reasons was unable to pull off the win. But that's not the point of today's lesson. The point today is to show you that it is not, in fact, impossible for somebody who is not a titled player to defeat a titled player at a game of chess. In order to win against a national master, candidate master, international master, and potentially even a grandmaster, is to go into playing a game with a certain set of rules or mindsets within your head. And so those are what we are going to take a look at today. The first game we are going to look at is one game in which I was very close to defeating a national master rated 2093. I believe this game was played in a blitz tournament, and that's how normally I get paired against titled players. So the first step in order to beat a titled player is just to get paired against them. And the best way I've found is just enter into open rapid or blitz tournaments. Sometimes even bullet tournaments work too, but I've only been paired once or twice, I believe, against a titled player there. So the first step to beat a titled player is obviously to get a game against one of them. You could also try challenging them, but I've not had very much luck with that. They're like, who's this random dude who's trying to challenge me to a game of chess? I'm not going to accept. He's probably going to cheat. So I've not had much luck with that. But today, let's take a look at Fear No Evil 12, a national master from the United States, and I got the white pieces in this game. So I opened up with d4. d4, and he responds with b5. b5 is a bit of an unusual move, at least something that I'm not very familiar with. So it's definitely going to lead into a game that's pretty offbeat and pretty wild. So let's see what happens. We have knight f3, a6, e4, and here we see another theme in beating a titled player. It is pretty early in the game, true, but one big theme when playing against titled players is to take space. Taking space in the center is very, very important. Whoops, I meant like this. We have pawns are controlling all four of these center squares. So when you're playing against a titled player, you're going to do the best if you're able to take a lot of space. And with this strange opening style where he's just attacking on the queen side, this gives me the perfect opportunity to throw my pawns into the center and start developing as quickly as I can in order to take advantage of this space and hopefully cramp his pieces later on in the game. So we have bishop b7 and then c4. The first mistake I made here. So this did offer him a free pawn here on e4, and after takes, pawn recaptures, and then bishop can take here on e4. Kind of the idea with this opening, though, is that by taking that extra pawn in the center, black is giving white a lot of extra time to continue developing while he's going ahead and taking a pawn. It is true that taking that pawn could become a big problem since it is the center pawn for white, but there are ways to get around it and there are ways to fight back, primarily through just quickly developing and taking advantage of the fact that our opponent here has moved 2 pawns and 1 minor piece. Nothing else is developed. So we're going to take advantage of that by throwing our pieces into the center and developing quickly. However, in this game, after pawn takes and then bishop takes, black does not actually take here, which is the best move because, like I mentioned, you don't want to get too far behind in development. So here we see more developing moves. Knight f6, and here we have e5. So e5, another theme when playing against a titled player, is to go on the offensive. Attack your opponent. Just because they're higher rated and just because they have a nifty little red title in front of their name does not mean that you shouldn't attack them, that you should be too afraid to go after them. So, as we see here, attacking with pawns, and calculate the moves, obviously, but It is very important to attack your opponent, and don't just let their high rating or title scare you away from attacking them. So he puts his knight in the center. We have a trade of pieces and castles. So now I think we could take a good step back and see where we are in this game. Our opponent has moved 2 pawns here. We're going to forget about the pawn that was here because it is traded off. And they have moved a single bishop here. Whereas for white, we are castled. We've developed 1 knight here, we've developed a bishop here, and we've got 2 pawns in the center. So the eval bar, it says plus 0.6. It's not a big advantage, but this is and can be quite a big deal. So we've got a lot of the center here, and we've got developed pieces, which is very important. So black doesn't want to be left behind, so the National Master is going to start developing his pieces. Here we have centralizing the rook and targeting the hanging piece. And he retreats his bishop here. So I play a3. The idea here is to push b4 and take even more space. And black plays bishop e7. Bishop e7, a mistake, but not terrible. So the idea with this is to allow himself to castle here, and kind of just lets me go about with my own plan of just continuing to expand and continuing to develop pieces and take more of the center. So National Master has castled, and I offer a trade of bishops. Here, probably not a very good move. I've already developed this bishop, and there's no reason to trade off to waste a move to trade off this bishop for his only active bishop here, when I could instead play something like bishop b2, or perhaps even bishop f4, something that helps me develop and starts to defend my pawns in the center. So admittedly, this was not a very good move, but on the bright side, it did allow me to develop my queen, and we have a very long-term target, but this is extremely long-term because I have no direct ways of attacking this anytime soon. So we have f6. Okay, he's challenging my center with an off-center pawn, and I develop a piece. So we take back, and we still have a central pawn, and it is supported, but it would have been nice to not have to trade this off. But it's not the worst thing in the world. So we have queen e8. Here I bring in my last piece that has not been moved, rook to c1, and I have a target here. So now with rook c1, I do have some tactical ideas. We have a single pawn that's defending this knight. That should set off a little bit of an alarm inside your head. If you only have one piece defending yours, and there are potentially sacrifices that can be made in order to loosen this piece. Uh-oh. Queen h5, a blunder from a National Master. Even titled players are not immune from making blunders. So this move, it's quite strange. He's attacking this, yes. It's defended by my king and my knight. So there's nothing to worry about here. He is attacking this, which is defended just once by my pawn, also by my queen. But the reason why this is such a bad move here is because it leaves d7 undefended. So I go ahead and I take it. Now we see the problems with this move. The queen is attacking both the knight on c6 and the bishop on e7. So the National Master is now in quite a bit of trouble. So he takes my knight here, trying to make the position more complicated. Which it does, admittedly. We now have 3 hanging pieces here. We have a hanging pawn here, and we have a hanging pawn here. That's 5 hanging pieces. So this is quite a wild position. And the question here is what to do, what to take. So if you were playing as white, what would you do, and why would you play that move? So the best move here is to take the rook here with the pawn. This gets the most amount of material, and it still leaves the National Master with a whole lot of hanging pieces. After pawn takes rook, queen could take here, but then you're just going to lose another piece. So black is unable to take your pawn. And there's not really a good way to save everything. You're going to lose one of these 2 pieces, and probably you're going to end up losing one of these pawns. However, in this game, I was looking around and I was trying to find a way to win everything. So I got a little bit greedy here, and I took the pawn here on e6. And what I missed was that he can actually save this piece, and he can save his bishop all by moving his rook to f7. Blocks the check, defends here, and saves the rook. A fantastic move. It does still leave the knight hanging, but as we previously mentioned, you're going to lose material here because just there's too many things that are undefended. However, the National Master actually missed this move and played king h8, which leaves me with a choice of 3 pieces I can take now. So, here I took the knight. Looked pretty straightforward. Another potential move I could have considered was queen takes here. We target both rooks, and this one leads with check. Actually, I think that's checkmate. I don't know if there's a good way to get around this. Let's see. So, queen takes here. I don't know. Let's say he plays a move and he saves his rook. Obviously, this would be a fine move, I suppose, defending everything, and I think that kind of saves him. But let's see. If he didn't play that, then we have takes, rook f8, and that's how they block mate. Okay, so that does block mate. Another idea, it's obviously not the best, just because you allow this rook to escape and start doing a whole bunch of stuff. So here instead I take on c6. Now, it's not the best move because I could have won so much more material right here. Rooks are worth 5 points of material, whereas knights are only worth 3. So it would have been a much better deal for me to just take this rook and then worry about taking one of these 2 pieces later, because they're not going anywhere. I'm going to win one of them anyway. So definitely should have taken that. And then he plays rook f7, defending his bishop. The rook is not hanging, it's defended by the queen, so I cannot take, unfortunately. But I can take another pawn. So I take a pawn here, and now the National Master is facing a new set of problems. They are pinned. If this bishop decides to move anywhere, for example here, this is a free rook. Because after queen takes, and I got a queen and a rook at the cost of a single rook. So I just won material. So this bishop is pinned, and so he brings over his other rook. So we have rook e8. So I set up another pin. So I'm already up material. I'm currently up 3 points in material, and so when you're up material, usually, like 99% of the time, it's going to be the best idea to just trade down pieces. The fewer pieces your opponent has, the fewer chances they're going to have to turn the game around and beat you, especially when you're facing a National Master. So here I'm looking for trades. He does not trade. So I go ahead and take the rook. So here, queen d7. Another pawn was hanging here, but I had some ideas of trying, queens don't move like that, trying to somehow win a piece. And he plays h6. So h6 gives the king some breathing room and eliminates any back rank problems. Don't move here, that's just a hanging queen. So I play e6. What to do in this position? Well, why not e6? Get a pawn closer to getting promoted and put the National Master in a much worse position. So king g8. h3 allows me some breathing room as well. And then queen to g6. So queen g6 allows some infiltration ideas to c2, targeting my bishop, and trying to get some counterplay going on here. Just trying to distract me in some way from what's actually happening over here, where all of his pieces are tangled. So here I played rook c1, just trying to stop that queen from coming in here. But what I missed was that that's not actually necessary. If the queen, let's say I go here. If the queen does go here, you hang a rook, and you're getting checked, and you're losing really badly now. So let's say queen here, and everything's still hanging, but let's say perhaps something like this. So now I'm targeting more pieces, and sure, he could take this, but I get this, and then I'm going to have this pass pawn, which is going to be very powerful. Engine here says this is a mistake, but it's just less accurate. It's also a winning idea, but I guess not as much as just straight up taking that and then letting the rook get taken, and then perhaps king g2. So just to show that, something like this. And then now you still have your bishop, and you're threatening problems right here, as in mate in 1. And if he does happen to defend that, you just run your pawn and you try to promote. So here he plays bishop to g5, attacking my rook, so I move my rook. Nothing too crazy. Rook e7, defended by the bishop, trying to get my queen out of there, and creating a blockade for the pawn. So now we have a bit of maneuvering, and I'm just trying to get this pawn promoted. I've got the support here, and with queen d2, the queen is attacking both my bishop here on d4, and it's attacking my rook. So I play rook e5, saving the rook, but accidentally making a horrible blunder. Can you find the best move for black in this position? So if you said bishop f6, you'd be wrong. It's not bishop f6. That is what the National Master played in the game, but it is a blunder because it allows the rook to just move down here, or the queen, and you're able to defend the bishop sufficiently. So in the game, I did play rook here. Apparently not the best, but it's the most straightforward. So after bishop takes, rook takes, and everything's fine. So the best move here, is actually queen to c1 check. Queen c1 check leaves my king here with one good move. Obviously we could block, but we don't want to hang our rook. So we're going to go king h2, followed by bishop f4, attacking the king, checking the king, and also winning the rook. So after g3, then just bishop takes, and then you can just take with the queen, and you've just won material. Fortunately for me, however, the National Master was looking at bishop f6 and played it, which allowed me to play rook e4, and then after this trade, everything is fine. So, he gets back over here, he takes, I decide to trade queens as I'm getting pretty low on time, and here we have a winning endgame. So, he's got a rook and a single pawn over here. I've got 2 pawns and a rook, and if you've ever studied endgames, you would know that this is a completely winning one. 2 connected pawns going up against a single pawn, you're always going to be able to get a pass pawn. For example, you could play b5, and if takes, then you've suddenly got a pass pawn. Now, exactly which moves to play here, I'm not sure because endgames can get pretty wild, but if you'd like to set up this position on your computer, you could analyze this and see what move is the best in this position. So I've got a good 8 seconds on the clock, so excuse any horrible moves we have here in the endgame. But here what I'm doing is I really couldn't figure out exactly how I'm going to get this pawn through. Perhaps something like rook d3 and then bring it over, but then, maybe he's going to go like this, bring the rook over, and then just blockade, something like that. So what I do is I bring my king to the center. Bringing your king to the center of the board in any endgame, well, most endgames, have to add that disclaimer, most endgames is going to be the best idea, because once your king is in the center, now he can actually help support your rook and help support the pushing of your pawns. So we both bring our kings into the center. I start expanding. Check, check here, and we're doing some slight maneuvering. Here we have pawn f4. After takes, you just take with check. Then the king goes here. He's attacking the rook. He also can go here and then attack your pawn, which, probably isn't good. So I offer a trade. However, with a 1.5 seconds on the clock, this trade kind of doesn't work. And then he's able to flag me with this rook, just giving away a rook. If I had more time, this is obviously a terrible move, because after takes, there's no way you can win with 2 pawns and a king against 4 pawns, a rook, and a king. So, here we see the conclusion of my game against the National Master. So, the whole game was pretty well fought, and I think my advantages really began in the beginning of the game when he played these strange moves here on the side. These strange moves, and I was just able to take a ton of space in the center. So the moral of this game is, number 1, get a game against a titled player. You got to get some experience, and you got to give yourself the chances to win against these players. Second, whenever possible, take space in the center. Third, develop your pieces. Develop your pieces as quickly as you possibly can, especially if your opponent is playing a strange opening on the side of the board, where they are not even contesting you in the center in any way. Fourth, castle early. Here we have some developing moves, trades, and then castles. Getting castled is extremely important. It is remarkable how many games of chess I have lost just by not castling and by leaving my king in the center. By leaving your king in the center, you expose him to all sorts of attacks, which obviously are not good. So we have like bishop b4. Straight off the bat, we have an attack there. Perhaps queen here if only the knight wasn't there. We could have queen h4, and we've got more pressure on the king. And it's not hard for you to just get checkmated with your king in the center when your opponent can just rush in with all of their pieces. So, castle early, that is very, very important. And fifth, don't shy away from attacking your opponent. Just because they're higher rated than you does not mean that they are somehow immune to all of your attacks. They do make mistakes. As we saw in this game, the National Master did make several mistakes, most of which I was able to take advantage of, some of which not so much. So, for a very quick example, just here, e5, sure, it wasn't the best move, but it's not a terrible move. You attack the knight, and you expand your center. So, 2 good things in one. Okay, so for our second game, this one was actually really interesting. So I joined a 3-minute, just no increment, just 3-minute blitz tournament on chess.com. And this guy, an international master, with the username Funo09, he was actually in first place. So I remember looking at him and like watching his game before the game started, or before I got paired, and I was just kind of watching him. I was like, oh, that's cool. Wonder if I'll get paired against him. And then kaboom, I get paired against an international master. So I got paired against him, and my first instinct was to think, okay, well, I'm dead. But that's not exactly how you want to be going into a game against a higher rated player. So another takeaway here, another point that you should take away from this lesson is, even when you're playing against a higher rated opponent, never get into the mindset that your opponent is unbeatable. It doesn't matter who they are unless they're like a grandmaster. Okay, we'll give them an exception. But there's nobody beneath the grandmaster level who is unbeatable. So always go into your game with the attitude that if I fight for this game, I will have a good chance to win. And so after that first thought came into my mind, I quickly threw that out, because I'm not going to play a good game if I'm just expecting to get beat. I'm going to play passively. I'm going to just, casually do this, do that, and then just eventually get a horrible position, and the International Master is obviously going to win. So, another interesting thing about this game is that at no point in this entire match was I in a completely losing position. The only times where my opponent was slightly winning was no more than half a pawn of an advantage, according to the sorry, according to the eval bar on the left-hand side of the screen. So let's jump into this game. It was a pretty exciting game. It's not often you get paired against an international master. So I open with e4. e4 is a bit more of a sharp opening. It leads to more confusing and more complicated positions. There's tons of different openings you can go through with this. And we get d5. So d5, best move here is just take it. Once your opponent takes back with the queen, then you develop a knight with a tempo, which means you develop a knight and it's attacking something important, which means your opponent can't just develop as well, which would leave them, up in development. They've moved their queen technically in the center, and now they have a knight in the center. That means they have two major pieces in the center, and I've only got one. So they'd be ahead of me in development. But because I'm developing here and I'm attacking something that's important, the international master has to do something about that first. And so he plays queen a5. Now I get to stay ahead of him in development, and I can continue developing. Okay, apparently I did not play that. Maybe that would have been smart. Instead I play a d4. So this game, unlike the last one, you'll see that I kind of played a little bit more passively, which did not really help me in this game. So I played bishop d2. The idea is, okay, maybe I can, attack something. Whoops, don't go there because you get killed in two different ways. Maybe you could go here, and this is actually a discovered attack on the queen. If I move my knight over here, that bishop is now attacking that queen. So that was kind of my idea. He plays c6, a strange move because normally you don't want to put a pawn here because that's exactly where your knight wants to go. But he does it anyway, so I don't think I could really punish him for that, so he's going to get away with it this time. So I do play knight f3 finally, and he pins my knight to my queen. Okay, I unpin it. But again, you'll notice here, I did castle early in this game, just like the last one, but you'll notice here that all of my pieces are all in this little box right here. They're all on the first 3 rows of the chessboard. And this is not a position you really want to be in. You want to have your pieces a little more extended than this. You want to have at least 1, maybe 2 pieces out here on the 4th row, but then you do want to be quite wary about putting pieces on your opponent's 4th row, or in this case on the 5th row of the chessboard, just because it's a lot easier for them to attack you if you are on this 5th row. And for my opponent, if he starts getting onto my side of the board like this, then I can start attacking him. So it's kind of a mutual thing. So he plays e6. I play a3 with the idea of playing b4. Now I'm finally starting to get some space ideas. And kind of just attacking over here. So here the international master plays bishop d6. A good move, develops a piece, and threatens to win a pawn. Additionally, it also opens up the door to castle kingside and queenside, so he can choose which side he wants to castle to. So just to show you how this right here is actually winning a pawn, we have, let's play a random move. That we have bishop takes the knight, who is the second piece defending this pawn, along with my king. After bishop takes back, because you don't want to open up your king to attacks down the center file, we have bishop takes with check. And the king has to move. I can't play a move like g3 because I would lose my king. So this, and then bishop retreats. And I lost a pawn. Awesome. So, let's see if I can avoid doing that in this game. h3. Moving the pawn out of the way of the attack and attacking this bishop. And he plays h5. So, in this position, if you are playing for white, what move would you play? And particularly, would you take, or should you take, the bishop on g4? Okay, so if you were thinking to take the bishop on g4, it is kind of good that you are winning some material, because after pawn takes, you did win material. But the cost of that is that you opened up your opponent's rook, and your knight's under attack. And if you move your knight, then very bad stuff starts to happen. As you can see, the eval bar dropped to mate in 3, so check here. What's the move? Bishop g1. Oh, that's mean. Bishop g1, and you can't go anywhere. You're being checked by the enemy rook, so you have to take the bishop, and then you die. So it's very dangerous to take there, and it's not great. It kind of puts you in a very rough position here, because after takes, and you're always going to have to deal with this open file on your king side, and going against a strong opponent, that's probably going to end the game right there. So I did not take. The best move, according to the engines, was to play b5. There is a lot of attacking opportunities I can have over here by just lunging my pieces at my opponent. But instead I play rook e1. So not the best move, but it's not terrible either. It does line up the rook with the king, which is generally a good thing to do in the opening until your opponent castles. Then perhaps something like this. So if he castles queenside, you play rook b1, or I don't know, rook c1, wherever the king decides to sit, and you could line them up. And that generally will help you long term with attacks on the enemy king. So rook e1, not terrible. He castles, which is a blunder. Why? The reason is because it invites an attack to your king. So as I mentioned earlier, I have a lot of pieces that I could just start attacking my opponent with. And by castling to the side where there's a lot of attacking going on, or a lot of attacking chances, you're just begging your opponent to just come over and just rip apart all of your pawns with theirs, and line up their rook and their queen, and perhaps toss a bishop in for good measure, and you could easily get overwhelmed here. If you hadn't noticed, I'm not a titled player, so don't expect me to win based off of this blunder, but if my opponent was playing against a grandmaster, this would probably be a losing mistake. So instead of castling, bishop takes f3 was better. Just to, I don't even know, just perhaps because the bishop doesn't really have anywhere to go, I think would be my guess. And retreating, retreating is kind of just wastes a move. So I guess trading is better. If I was black, I would be very concerned, well, not concerned, but like wary about taking and then allowing my opponent to get a bishop here, which just stares down on my king side. That just seems unpleasant. So, you know, the engine says one thing, the IM says no, let's castle. Okay, so that happened. So I play knight to g5, knight g5. I saw the rooks are in a nice pattern here, and this is a fork. And I could get a pawn, and then I could potentially get a rook. He takes. So now if I just jump in here and I say, haha, I got you, and I try to fork the two rooks, well, then I lose my queen. So I can't do that. So I have to take back. And taking with the queen here is a little bit better, just because this develops the queen. And taking with the rook has no new targets. He was always looking at the e6 pawn, and he still would be. So taking with the queen is better here. And then additionally afterwards, you can now move the queen to f3, something you couldn't do if your rook was right here. And then you have the same long-term ideas as if there was a bishop here. So, the International Master does not miss this. He plays rook f8, guards against the fork, and I play queen e3. Supposedly a mistake. The idea here is to take on a7. I saw this pawn was loose, and I thought, let's attack it. Why not? And it actually paid off. He missed it. So I got a free pawn against an international master. Awesome. This move, kind of an interesting one. The idea is to bring the bishop here. So bishop to g3. Right now that wouldn't work so great because just pawn takes. But this is a good long-term move. Although the timing of it was kind of poor because you just hung a pawn and now your king's under attack pretty directly. So he plays rook h5. He attacks my knight. The knight's defended by my bishop, so he wouldn't take it straight away. But I figured my knight's not really doing a whole lot there, so since he's attacking it, I might as well just bring it back to the center. Now we're offering up a trade here. If knight takes, I would definitely take, well, actually, before I tell you what I would take with, what piece would you take with? Would you take with the rook, the pawn, or the knight? The move that I would play is knight takes. Just to put this extra knight in the center. I mean, the knight would be much stronger here than when it's right here. And additionally, after the knight moves, the c2 pawn becomes freed up and you can play c4, which means you are getting ready to just attack this king. He checks me, so okay, not a big deal. Single check never hurt nobody. He plays rook f5. So now he's attacking this pawn. My knight's defending it. My king is defending it. But it is setting up long-term, admittedly, it is setting up some long-term threats. So it's not a bad move. I played bishop e3. Bishop e3 defends here and also opens up b6 as a potential square to attack on. Can't play it right now because knight takes and I lose a piece. So bishop here, knight takes, and then queen takes, and I'm just losing. But like I said, it's long term. So he plays knight d5, a good centralizing move, threatening my knight and also threatening my bishop. So this knight actually is not the most useful knight I have. It's kind of in a weird spot. It can't go here. It can't go here. Going here is weird. Going here is, just retreating. Going here is retreating. And this move maybe has some potential, but it's kind of vague. So it's not really doing much. And this is now a very powerful knight. It's planted in the center. So I just go ahead and take it. So after taking, this also allows c4. Not straight away, we have to save the knight, so I play knight c5. The main idea I had with this move was to attack b7, but it is pretty well defended. Yeah, that's a good move. So if he doesn't play this move here, I can actually check there, and my tactic doesn't work. That would only work if this knight wasn't here. The idea was that if check here and the king moves there, then I can take this pawn and only the queen's defending it and I just won a pawn. He's an international master. He would never miss that. So knight b8 is a good move. So I couldn't find any further attacking chances here, so I just retreated my queen to a4. No big deal. And here was the first big mistake. And perhaps my only big mistake. We'll see. So I played c4. I did not fully recognize that after the bishop came here, it was just attacking my rook. But if you look at the eval bar, it's still virtually a draw. Even though if he takes, he'd be up material. It's still pretty much a draw because of how powerful all these pawns are right here. The amount of pressure I have on the queen side is extremely strong. And trading off this active bishop for my kind of inactive rook, it only nets him a single pawn gain. And other than that, it's really not that helpful. So that's why the eval bar has only dropped to minus 0.5 or minus 0.4. Can't really decide. But overall, it's not actually winning for black, which is pretty interesting. But then he locked it off. So, okay, that's fine. Attacked my bishop, so I'll move that. And he centralizes his other rook. I bring back my queen. I gotta reroute it somehow because it's not, or at least it doesn't feel like it's doing very much over here. The engine really wants me to play queen a8, but it really doesn't look like that queen is doing anything right there. The knight's defended, and the queen's just kind of sitting there. So I try to bring my queen back. So I bring the queen over here to g4. So I pin this rook to the king, and I threaten this pawn. So I have some ideas here. Opponent plays b6, obviously attacking the knight, so we're going to have to move the knight. b3 kind of wasn't a great move, bringing it here to the center, which, I mean, that would have been so much stronger. The knight has more squares he can go to and is supported, not like that, would be supported by a pawn. So, here we see the international master doesn't like the pin, he wants to get out of it, so he moves his king. And so I start attacking the king. The king has moved further over here, which means he's even more of a target. So let's attack it. Now we have bishop g3. So the threat here is rook takes on f2. Rook takes on f2 would be bad. Check, and the king is wide open. It's not good. So I played f3, which was not good. I did see that it hung the rook, but I couldn't figure out how I defend this and save the rook. Had I looked a little longer, probably could have seen this. But I did have 18 seconds on the clock, so it's not too surprising that I missed this. And bishop takes, kind of strange, but we have queen e7 and then kabam! Look at this, bishop takes h4. The international master somehow blunders this skewer. So I attack the queen, and as soon as the queen moves, that is a free rook. So he plays queen to e3, counter threats. So after takes, he wants to take this pawn with check, and then the king moves, and then he takes my knight. So that's exactly what we do. And here, I could have, probably should have taken this pawn. We're down to 7 seconds now. He takes the pawn over here. I try to centralize the queen. The idea was to put the queen here. It wasn't thought out very well because I did have 6 seconds now, but that was my idea. He brings the queen back here, and then I saw bishop e7 as a quick way to attack the queen, which would buy me a little bit of time to think about what move to play. But it really didn't work. And then bishop b4, retreating the bishop, and I'm just super low on time now. Perhaps something like queen d3, and then maybe I win something. So let's play a random move like that, this, and then that would hang something, wouldn't it? Here, and then we could play like rook here, supported by the bishop, and we win the queen. But unfortunately, that did not happen. I played bishop b4, and he played d3, which is actually a blunder, which is kind of funny. But with such time situations, it doesn't really matter what he plays. He was still going to win anyway. So this concludes the second game, and the final game I'll be showing you in today's lesson on how to beat titled players. So as you can see, titled players are not undefeatable. They make a fair amount of mistakes, like right here on screen we see a blunder. You just need to follow a couple different guidelines in order to give yourself the best chance or chances of winning. So I've got a list here of 7 things that can help you defeat a titled player for yourself. So listen up, here we go. First, play games in blitz or rapid format. You need some time to think. If you try to play a very quick game against somebody who's a master player, you're going to lose every time, unless they somehow make a horrendous blunder, but it's pretty rare. You need time to think, because they have seen far more positions, they've played far more games, they know more openings, they pretty much know more about everything in chess than you do, by probably tenfold. So you're not going to be able to um, have the same pattern recognition as they do and therefore win. You're going to need to think on your own. You're going to need to take some time and figure out what is going to be the best position or the best move. And that's why playing blitz or rapid games is best, because that gives you the time you need. Second, play solid openings. When you're playing against titled players, don't play some weird offbeat line, because even if on the off chance you do catch them off guard, they're probably just going to go ahead and crush you after that, because the position is so strange and you probably aren't very familiar with it, and they're just going to find ways to get some cool tactics and end up winning the game. So play solid openings. That'll get you through the opening, ideally in an equal position, which gives you good chances of going on and fighting a fair game from there on out. You don't want to be losing in the opening, because that doesn't help you. Third, don't shy away from attacking higher rated players. If you shy away from attacking them, you're just going to let them walk all over you, and you can't do that. You got to create your own threats. You've got to make them think. You've got to give them challenges, and when you give them challenges, you give them opportunities to make a mistake. And sometimes they will. And then once they make that mistake, be looking for that and then take advantage of it. Fourth, take space. So in the openings, and kind of in the middle game as well, you want to take lots of space. Don't overextend where you throw your pawns out a little too far, you get your pieces too far into the enemy side of the board, because that means that your pieces are going to be very weak if they can get behind your pieces and then just start attacking all of the pieces from within your enemy, or from within your army's camp. So take space, but don't go too far. Make sure you have plenty of space so you can maneuver your pieces around and so that you can create threats. Fifth, castle early. You do not want to get stuck with your king in the center of the board against a very experienced chess player. That just never ends well. Castle early and then develop, take space, and create threats. That's how you got to do it. You can't fight a chess game if you leave your king in the center. You've got to get him to safety to either side of the board and then leave him there. Sixth, don't view your high-rated or titled opponents as unbeatable, because they are not unbeatable. They are very much beatable, but it is going to be difficult. Difficult, not impossible. So make sure in your head when you're starting a chess game, don't get into the mindset of, oh, this guy's titled player, I'm going to lose, let's play the most wild opening I can possibly think of and see how quickly I get checkmated. No. Play solid openings and then do your very, very best. Watch out for simple tactics, castle, play solid openings, all that together, but don't view them as unbeatable, because they are not. 7. Play titled players often. The more often you play against a titled player, the more chances you give yourself to be able to beat one of them. If you've only played against 1 or 2 titled players, the odds of you getting a win somehow is extremely low. So play more games against titled players so you give yourself more chances to win. Or draw. I don't know. But a win's better, so let's go for a win. So thank you so much for listening to this lesson. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully this gives you some guidance in playing against higher rated players, not just title players, but just any high rated opponent. If you do end up beating a titled player, be sure to share that game in the comment section down below. That would be awesome to see. I'd love to take a look at that, and perhaps I could include that in my next lesson on how to beat a titled player, and we could look at some lower rated players who were able to defeat a chess master. I think that'd be really cool. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something, had a good time, and I will see you guys in the next video or the next lesson. See ya.